Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk here about this tax spreadsheet, how you can use it, and what does it mean. First off, I want to point out that the same exact rules apply for this spreadsheet as did for the budgeted spreadsheet. That is, you only type where there are black boxes, because in other boxes, they have equations that you don't want to mess with. So keep that in mind as we go through this. Another thing that's important to recognize is that you do not have to do any other research for this beyond what you've already completed. So this should not be research heavy. Really, the big thing is you just need to understand what the boxes say, and it can look very, very confusing in the beginning, but hopefully this video will help to clear up any confusion that you may have. First, we're going to look at, and really what we're trying to accomplish, let's say that first. What we're trying to accomplish is looking at how much money are you going to pay in taxes in a year, real taxes, beyond just income tax, because there's other things that go into it. And what is the government using that money for? This spreadsheet is going to generalize some of it, and I'll explain how I'm generalizing here as we go through it, but it's going to give you a better sense as to where your money is being spent. And the reality is that you're not going to be happy about some of it. And that's just something that you need to be aware of. And, well, let's say this does connect to the government unit a little bit because it makes you think about who you're voting for, what their policies are, because that has an impact on where your money goes. Let's start with this. The median income in Upper St. Clair is about $108,000. So we're going to use that as my little starting point here just so you can get a good grasp of how it works in Upper St. Clair on average. Then we'll change it up as we go. That would mean this, that federal income tax, without counting deductions, which I'm sure most people are going to have, that's going to make it so they pay a little bit less. But that would mean they're going to be paying about $23,857 in taxes. That's for federal income tax. The state also has an income tax that's 3.07%, and this is as of, I believe, 2012. So it could be a little bit different as of now. But this would cost the $108,000 income person another $3,315. And finally, we have total income tax here in C9, which is just those two added together, which is about $27,000. So off your income directly, before anything else, you're going to be taxed at about $27,000. There are other things that you need to add in now too, so we're going to go to the tab 2, which is personal expenses. Saving, we're going to count that, and the reality is that some of that would be tax-free, but for now we're just going to take that away from your remaining income. Maybe you should have done a little bit different order, but not a problem overall. And I want to point out a couple things now, and this is where we start getting into some generalized ideas here. What we're trying to look at here is how much are you going to be paying in sales tax based upon your spending. So what I did is, and what the goal of this spreadsheet is to set aside this savings because you're saying, okay, we're not going to spend that money. Then down here in part 2 it says, the sales tax in PA is 6% but does not tax all goods. For purposes of this spreadsheet, we will assume that 3/4 of all of your spending is taxed with sales tax. That is a gross generalization. It's not really a good number. However, it's really hard to come up with what the number should be, so we're just going to use that here. What that would mean is if you're spending about 75% of your money on stuff that gets taxed with the sales tax, and the tax rate is 6%, you would be charged another $3,273 in taxes on your sales. Sales tax differs per state. That's important to understand. So this is PA state sales tax. If you're in a different state, it will not function the same way. There are other taxes which are known as excise taxes. An excise tax is a tax that's placed directly on a good that you don't even realize is there because it's already built into the price. For example, whenever you go to buy a or to put gas into a car, the amount of taxes that you have, and we're looking here directly in B14, you're going to pay 31.2 cents to the state government on every gallon of gas, and another 18.4 cents to the federal government for every gallon of gas, equaling out to just about 50 cents per gallon, which is taxes. So, if you really want to put it into perspective, that would mean that if you're paying, let's say, your car, that is, has 18 miles per gallon, and you drive 15,000 miles in a year, you're going to pay another $400+ in gas tax. Maybe you're saying that's not a big deal, it's just $400, but keep in mind how much this does really add up. We're going to fix a little typo there, nobody likes typos. Alright, and continuing on down here, this is not a choice thing, but it's just something that I thought was really important for you to recognize. The federal government taxes recreational drug use tremendously, and recreation maybe not the best word for this, but cigarettes, alcohol, they're taxed at extremely high rates. So if you look over here at this pie chart, and the pie chart won't show up if you're using Google Drive, just so that you know that. It basically says here that if you are paying for a pack of cigarettes, and I found some averages from not too long ago, and the pack of cigarettes, let's say on average, was costing about $4.99, or excuse me, that'll be $5 even. $2.61 was actually on taxes, and then $2.39 was on the cigarettes, and that's the profit for a cigarette company. So I mean, there's a ton of taxation on that. And if you look in cell D19, that shows that we have about $20 billion in national revenue just from cigarette taxes. From alcohol, about $6 billion was made by the federal government for that purpose. So interesting thing to note how much that is. And another thing, if you want to be really, really nitty-gritty here, 101, $1.01 was going to the federal government per pack of cigarettes versus $1.60 for the state government. Now, one that you're all probably going to deal with is cell phones. Your cell phone bill has a ton of taxes on it. About 19% tax rate is what's going to federal and state governments. So when you look at it, let's say a $100 phone bill is going to turn into a $119 phone bill. And why is that? That's because you're paying a lot of taxes. It's a pretty scary thing to think about whenever you look at it in great depth. So we're adding in a lot of things overall here, and you're saying, okay, now I'm going to pay another $344 in taxes on my cell phone, another $413 on gas, another $3,000 on spending. I think you can recognize you're getting up there pretty high. And we haven't come to one that's a really, really huge number that's going to be a little bit scary, and that is property tax. So, living in Upper St. Clair, that's how this is built, is for Upper St. Clair only. It will not be accurate for anywhere outside of Upper St. Clair, just because of the nature of local taxes and how they change based upon the municipality and school district in which you live in. For us, and people in Upper St. Clair, you're living in Upper St. Clair School District and Upper St. Clair Township, those numbers are going to be different than other places. The median home price in Upper St. Clair is $250,000. That's what we currently have here in the black box. You can type in yours if you would like. But the tax rates are a little bit complicated. Here's what you can basically say. If you were to multiply your home value times 0.00569, it's going to tell you how much money you're paying to Allegheny County in taxes. Going down to C9 to figure out how much you're paying to Upper St. Clair Township, it is your property value times 0.0046, and to know how much you're paying Upper St. Clair School District, it is your property value times 0.0241. You add it all up here, the median home in Upper St. Clair as of 2011 was paying about $8,600 in property tax alone. Now, when we put it all together, all these taxes that we've added up between income, sales, property tax, gas tax, cell phone tax, all of it, you're going to be looking at paying somewhere in the range of $40,000 on average in a year in taxes. That is a lot. And now, again, this is not perfect, and I wrote it right here just to kind of show everybody. It is extremely simplified, but it does get the point across. You're paying a lot in taxes, and for somebody making $108,000 to be paying $40,000 in taxes, I mean, that's a very, very significant amount of money. So I guess the point is, people don't always recognize all of the taxes that they're paying because it's not so clear-cut coming out of your income. It might be in spending that you have, though it still exists. That's part one of this. Okay, now part two. Many of you, to be quite honest, probably don't really care where the government is spending your money, but for those of you who do care, well, let's actually look at where it would go. Again, I want to say two things. Number one, this seems a little bit scary because there's a whole lot of stuff here. Raise your hand if you agree. And raise your hand if I just made you raise your hand while you're watching a video. Yeah, you can laugh at yourself. It's okay. Second, it does look a little bit scary, but it's really not, and you'll understand what it means in a minute. The other thing is there is some simplification that goes into this, and I want that to be very clear. This is not designed to be perfect, but it is pretty accurate, I will say that. So my methodology, just so you understand how this worked out and what was going on here, basically what we're going to look at is the percent of the budget that goes to specific spending. So if you look at this chart down here, it shows us what percent of the budget goes everywhere. What I did is basically said, okay, if that's the case, you're giving a certain amount of money. Let's just say 58% of the amount of money you're contributing to the federal government then is going to go towards paying for the military, which is the Department of Defense. And let's say 5% is going to go to housing and community. And in specific, I looked exactly at the federal budget from government documents, and that's how we came up with all these numbers, just so you know. So it is a little bit simplified because certain money would go to certain places, like maybe gas tax is going to go specifically to maintaining roads, but I just generalized it, made it simple and straightforward. That's that. What does this all mean? Now, if you want to make it a little bit easier to understand yourself, here's what we can do. This over here has nothing to do with you. Over on this side, this is purely just government expenses. So if you want to look at the budget, $707 billion were spent a couple years ago. I believe this might be 2012 numbers on the Department of Defense, $77 billion on education, $241 billion in debt interest payments. Oh boy, is that terrible, and we explain that in a minute. On this side, this is your contribution to those specific departments. So like what you could say is, okay, for the Department of Defense, what is my role in paying for the Department of Defense and for paying for the military and such? Well, here's what we can say. You spent, out of your $24,000 in the federal government, about $4,500 went to the Department of Defense. Now, if you want to look at the largest expense in that department, it was on operation and maintenance of the military. Not military personnel, but like the equipment, tanks, ships, all that good stuff. And you actually paid about $1,300 for that. So maybe you're happy with it, maybe you're not happy with it. You could argue that. There are a couple other ones here. I thought this one was interesting. The International Space Station and spending on NASA. You're spending $120 on NASA and $18 on the International Space Station, which I don't know. You may think that's good, you may not like it. That's your call. The one I want to focus on though is this in row 10. Debt interest payments. Currently we are in debt about $17 trillion. These numbers are from prior to that, where we weren't quite as far in debt. Given that we owe so much in debt, we have to actually pay interest on that. So, like, let's imagine that you take a loan out from the bank. You're going to be taking more money, or you're going to be paying more money back than what you're actually trying to pay for. Like, let's say you're trying to pay for a $10,000 car. You might actually pay the bank back $15,000, and you're paying them, let's say, $5,000 just so you can have the loan. It's how they make money off you. Well, the same thing happens whenever we borrow money and we go in debt as a nation. And to counter that, what we have to do is pay somebody else who's making money off of it. And for us as a government, since it's so much money, that's costing our country about $241 billion a year is what it's saying here from this specific year. We're just losing flat out. It's not going to any benefit for us. It's just so that somebody else can make money since we're borrowing their money. How much are you paying for that? Well, this person who's making the median income in Upper St. Clair with the median home price, they are paying $1,500 a year to somebody else making money off of our debt, which in all likelihood is probably in China. So kind of a bad thing that I think maybe is bothering you a little bit, but it is what it is. You can't really do much about it. So when you look at it over here and you look at this little chart here, it's showing you where your money's going. So the greatest thing that we have is going towards that debt and interest payment if we're looking at it on a more specific individual cost basis, though we are paying more overall for the Department of Defense and the military. Next, one of the state governments. Again, this on the left is purely the state overall budget. On the right is how your contributions play into it. And I do want to say this is pre-Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. So the health care costs would be a little bit different, but I don't have them up to date since this is from 2012. Now, public welfare. Let's say paying for medical assistance in 2012, you would be paying about $2,700 for that for public welfare, or excuse me, for medical assistance, that would be paying about $1,400. Basic education funding, in other words, funding to support other districts in the state, you would be paying about $1,400 for that. In Department of Corrections, excuse me, which would be like jails, prisons, things along those lines, you'd be paying almost $500 towards that annually. So you might not like it, but that's the way it is, and that's kind of what you have to do. On a local level, let's talk about this one now. So we have two different local governments here, and I want to make that very clear. The one that's highlighted right now is the school district up top, and then at the bottom, this is the township. Let's start up top with the school district and talk about what you're paying for really with your property tax, because that's a key thing to understand. So if you look at it, $6,225 of your property taxes is going directly to the school district budget, which as of, I believe this is 2 years ago again, so 2012, would have been about $60 million is how much the operating budget of Upper St. Clair School District is. Where is your money going? Well, let's say this. First off, teacher salaries is going to be the biggest expense that you have there, and as an individual, or in salaries overall, teacher salaries in specific, let's say, is the biggest single expense, and that would cost you about $1,800 per year off of your $250,000 home paying for teachers. Benefits, which would be like health care and things like that that are included in teacher contracts, that would be about $688. Contracted services, I'm not quite sure why I specifically left this one out. And then books and supplies, let's say that's another thing you could look at. Amount of money that you're spending on it. Here's one that's kind of interesting. Diesel fuel for buses. Your specific payment's about $43 that you'd be paying in diesel fuel. That's to make it so the buses can run, because you do have to pay for buses. Keep that in mind. Let's talk about the local government now. So we have our total expenses of about $32 million. That's the operating budget of the township. Your individual contribution is about $1,100. What are you paying for? Well, let's talk about a couple things here. If you want to look at it over here, we're paying for police full-time wages about $93. Garbage collection about $31.50 on top of other payments I believe that go into it. And the community and recreation center expenses, you're paying about $113 there. So that's not so that you can use the rec center, that's just so the rec center can exist and be operating in Upper St. Clair. The key that I want you to think about is, with a lot of these, you may not like them, you may not be happy with them, but that's the reality of the situation that you face. And if you're not happy with things related to taxes, think about contacting a representative or voting differently the next time around. That's really just about the only way you can do it. If you want to have a little bit of fun with this, look at what would happen if your income was extremely high and how it would change things around. Because if you had, let's say, $1 million income and you had $1 million home, you're looking at very, very significant taxes. And now what we're looking at is that you'd be paying somewhere in the range of, it looks like about $400,000 in taxes, including for the military. You'd be paying $58,000 for the operation of our military, $19,000 or almost $20,000 for our debt. And being more specific on the local level, you'd be paying almost $13,000 in salaries, and you'd be paying $450 on your $1 million home. Just so that the rec center exists in the community, when in reality a lot of people could get membership for near that cost for the year. Maybe a little, not quite that much. They'd have to pay a little bit more, but relatively close. So it's just interesting to notice how much it changes the more that you're spending or the less that you're spending, but that's the way that our tax system works. So that is an explanation here of our tax spreadsheet. I hope that it is clear to you and you do understand this fully. So good luck with that.